Welcome back to part 2 of our 18 Primarch series. These are pretty much ranked by popularity. If you're new, I advise you to start from the beginning and work your way through, but it will still make sense if you don't want to. The Emperor had 20 sons, each with their own assortment of quirks and characteristics that made them wholly unique. There was, however, one son that stood high above the rest, a paragon for all to look up towards, a beacon of humanity's salvation. His name was Sanguinius. You cast your votes, so today we will talk about the legacy of the Great Angel, from growing up in a radioactive wasteland to killing the greater demon Kambanda, all the way to his tragic final chapter. I am here to tell you everything you need to know about the most revered son of the Emperor. During the scattering of the Primarchs, Sanguinius was cast onto the radiation-soaked wastes of Bal Secundus, somewhere now named Angel's Fall, as Bal Secundus is a bit of a silly name in retrospect. He was nearly killed upon his delivery by the planet's nomads, as Sanguinius was unlike any child that had ever been seen on that moon. Whereas he would initially appear as the cutest goddamn baby you ever did see, upon further inspection, two wings, pure and white as the driven snow, were found protruding from the child's back. Calmer heads would prevail as the infant radiated an aura that imbued all who laid eyes upon him with compassion, and he would begin to grow up with the nomads. As Sanguinius grew, he was not simply proficient in everything he did, he was the embodiment of perfection. His first true test of skill and martial acumen coming at the hands of a roving band of mutants ambushing his tribesmen. Sanguinius, overwhelmed with rage, rended through the flesh of over 100 mutants that day. When Sanguinius would let his rage take hold of him, the angel would no longer be a being of light, but instead a vengeful spirit wholly devoid of his trademark compassion for all that felt the wrath of his blade. Sanguinius would go on to lead the tribe in purging the mutant scourge threatening his people, his newfound position of leadership unquestionable. Through the spectacle of his actions, he would ascend to godhood in the eyes of his people. Not long after his son's ascension to leadership did the Emperor come knocking, his first witnessing of his son's abilities being the observation of his transcendent presence as an orator. Having approached a massive amphitheater carved into a mountainside, he stood amongst tens of thousands, all transfixed on a singular figure, his ninth son. Sanguinius was in the midst of a speech that is said to have reached into the very souls of his constituents, raising their spirits from within. The Emperor had no need to ask. He knew that this was his son. Sanguinius was overwhelmed with emotion upon meeting his father. Despite never having met him, he was immediately recognized, working theory as to how being a little tendency Sanguinius has to see into the future. He immediately accepted his father's request to join the Empire and began commanding the 9th Space Marine Legion, the Blood Angels. Realizing that Sanguinius had developed quite capable soldiers of his own, the best were initiated into the process of becoming Space Marines, in addition to the Terran forces that already made up the brunt of the Legion. From this point on, every Blood Angel would come from the moons of Bal. I could now proceed to tell you about every war prior to the betrayal of Horus. However, it makes far more sense to give you the short notes on the Blood Angels as a legion and how they operate, because Sanguinius is the star of the show. For now. Despite having a penchant for aggressive close-quarters combat, they keep their rage in check, unlike, for example, the World Eaters of the 12th. That is not to say that they always maintain that headstrong disposition. Once a Blood Angel is pushed too far, for reasons we will divulge later in the video, they completely lose their shit. They have entire detachments consisting of members who have entirely given in to those savage inclinations, losing control over their minds. When the dust settles on the battlefield after the deployment of these troops, it's as if a hurricane of carnage ravaged the landscape. Every member of the Blood Angels, even Sanguinius himself, are defined by being externally perfect, while constantly fighting to suppress the fury that burns within them. Cherished by nearly all of his brothers, Sanguinius would grow considerably closer to Horus than the rest. These two got along famously, Horus even swearing himself to secrecy when he caught Sanguinius killing one of his own sons after contracting the Red Thirst. The Red Thirst being a considerable flaw in the genetics of Sanguinius. Passed down to all of his sons, the Red Thirst, once afflicting a Marine, would give them uncontrollable cravings for human blood. Sanguinius was so terrified and ashamed of this that he even kept it secret from the Emperor, as he thought it would lead to his legion getting purged as a result. This is not the feral rage state that I mentioned earlier. That comes later. I always thought of his worry as an unnecessary concern, because Angron's men are out in the field fucking eating people, while Conrad's are having a spleen fiesta, but whatever. A lot of the brothers have big egos, and even bigger insecurities, so it's par for the course, really. When Horus turned heel and started playing lapdog for Chaos Gods, he intended to weaponize this flaw against his brother to corrupt his legion. You see, Horus recognized Sanguinius as one of the biggest threats to his existence, and it's not even a stretch to say he was afraid of Sanguinius. Reasonably so, if I'm being honest. Sanguinius was intended to be the champion of multiple Chaos Gods, but they found him too incorruptible. My favorite Primarch is not Sanguinius, but even I can recognize if the Angel were to take any other Primarch to task, they get their life insurance policy updated double time. There is only one individual who, without becoming a god, has any chance in hell of beating him, and I don't think it's gonna get mentioned today. Prior to knowing that Horus had fallen under the influence of chaos, Sanguinius followed his orders into the Signis system. Waiting for the Blood Angels in that system were the demonic forces of a chaos god, Slaanesh, commanded by a greater demon. A greater demon is the absolute strongest possible variant of any demon, barring the instance of a demon prince, but that's a Primarch that's become a demon, so it's a little bit of a different circumstance. The planet Signis Prime was deemed as the epicenter for the demonic outbreak, and Sanguinius decided he wanted smoke with everything on its surface, cultists and demons alike. It was not too long into his kill streak that he was facing off not with the greater demon of Slaanesh, but Khorne, which is a much bigger problem. This demon was none other than Kabanda. Kabanda, for the uninformed, is a bloodthirster, a demon given favor by Khorne, the chaos god of blood and violence. So when a bloodthirster shows up, you are well and truly fucked. Unless, of course, you're Sanguinius. Sanguinius initially won the confrontation, but held back the killing blow upon the demon, telling him that Horus had betrayed him. Kabanda then gets the advantage by killing a swath of the Angel's men, sending a psychic shockwave of pain that knocks Sanguinius unconscious. Sanguinius then decided he's the main goddamn character, and this is not where his story ends. He then proceeds to resume the ass-beating he was putting on the demon, delivering one of the top 5 coldest lines in Warhammer. The Angel would brutalize Kabanda, strangling him, beaten and bloody, with his very own whip. Sanguinius would then grab the bloodthirster's wing, and with cold, unfeeling eyes, he uttered, "Only angels may fly," as he tore the wing from the demon's body and threw him back into the pits of hell. We will absolutely look back on this full fight someday. After this, the Blood Angels would kill the greater demon of Slaanesh in command of the demonic forces swarming the Signis system and clear out the remnants of chaos residing therein. They then got shaken like a misbehaving baby across space due to magical interference, ending up at Robust Guillotine's house in the realm of Ultramar. Gilly then made Sanguinius acting emperor of his mini-imperium, because none of the loyalists had a clue what was really going on at this point. They just knew things were bad. So Gilly said, "Screw it. New command structure until we find Dad and figure out what's up." Then Lionel Johnson showed up. He was made chief of police, for lack of a better term. And then Conrad showed up, started a minor killing spree, as Conrad does. He ends up almost killing Gilly and the Lion. Then the Lion takes about 2 years to find him, beats the shit out of him, and breaks his back. Conrad is able to sow enough distrust in captivity that he makes the band break up, but accidentally gives away that the Emperor is still probably alive. That was also around the time that Sanguinius realized his premonitions of having Horus kill him would likely occur. Despite this fact, Sanguinius would venture back to take his place in the siege of Terra, the last battle of the Holy Civil War between Horus and the Emperor. The absolute tear that Sanguinius went on during this siege would be his greatest and final "what the Jesus Christ was that" moment. The only defenders that arrived in time were the Blood Angels, White Scars, and Imperial Fists that did one hell of a job fortifying defenses. Cleaving his way through wave after wave of demons that brave men would see in their nightmares, the angels would paint the skies crimson while he soared over the battlefield. It wasn't too long into his bloodletting of the Chaos forces that he would come face to face with an old foe, none other than Kabanda. In the face of the demonic threat, Sanguinius would once again allow his rage to burn bright as the sun within him. The struggle that ensued coincided with Sanguinius skewering the demon through his chest with his spear, and then plunging his sword hilt deep into the bloodthirster's spine, throwing him from on high, sending the demon plummeting to the ground as a lifeless, broken husk. Little did he know a greater opponent lie in wait, his very own brother, the now demon prince of Khorne, Angron. This fight was a violent, knockdown, drag-out brawl, and I will give you an in-depth play-by-play some other day. For now, it's only going to be a brief overview of the bloody push and pull leading to the victory of Sanguinius. The face-off was the penultimate example of power against speed, strength against agility, unfettered savagery opposed by flawless grace. The duel taking place almost entirely in the skies over the battlefield. As their legions massacred one another below, they were showered in the blood of their Primarchs, eviscerating each other in the air above them. As Angron would chase after Sanguinius, the Lord of Red Sands was unable to match the maneuverability of the Angel. Every time he thought his brother trapped, he would once again slip through his fingers. Sanguinius would be responsible for massive damage incurred to Angron, but he was simply too resilient in his newfound demonic form for any lasting impact. They kept up until the magnificent duel's culmination. Angron would finally get a grip upon his brother and drive his demonically tainted sword through the abdomen of Sanguinius. However, this action would prove to be the downfall of the Red Angel. Angron would gaze into the eyes of his brother. The compassionate saint he once knew was no longer present. His eyes were now a cold, empty place, uncaring that this monster was someone he once considered a friend. Sanguinius reached his hand up, grabbing the cortical implants protruding from Angron's skull, and in one barbaric motion wrenched the butcher's nails from his scalp, leading the dark technology to detonate and kill his brother. At last we have reached the final and most tragic exploit of the Great Angel. Horus knew that with his forces dwindling and the incoming assistance of other loyalist legions, his war would soon be finished if he didn't act soon. Empowered by all four Chaos Gods in a last-ditch attempt to destroy his father, he lowered the barriers surrounding his ship in hopes that the Emperor would challenge him. Sanguinius was able to perceive this change, and he rushed to the ship before anyone else could, beaten, bloodied, and exhausted. The reason for this wasn't some abstract notion of heroism. Sanguinius knew that he must die by his brother's hand. The angel's gift of peering into the future was still informing him that he would be killed by Horus, meaning that should he still be alive, Horus could not die. In a tragic twist of fate that would decide the outcome of humanity, the angel would limp into his brother's chambers, head held high, facing off with his most cherished brother and lifelong friend. Horus would kill Sanguinius in the confrontation that ensued, doling out an unimaginable amount of pain to his defenseless brother with his chaos-born abilities. This would result in a massive psychic shockwave so powerful that all descendants of the angel would be plagued by the Black Rage, a debilitating, inescapable curse that drives a Blood Angel mad by making them feel as if they were Sanguinius himself at the moments before his death. Sanguinius and his premonitions would prove to be correct upon the Emperor's confrontation with his corrupted offspring. In one last benevolent gesture to humanity, the angel's death unveiled the sliver of humanity left within his brother's corrupted soul. Providing a momentary opening for the Emperor, he would strike down the champion of chaos that was his son so very long ago. Sanguinius, though he would never admit such a thing, was the greatest of Primarchs, a beacon of light guiding humanity on its way toward true peace and prosperity, the hope for such a future tragically dying along with him. To this day, the Blood Angels are still marred by the death of their righteous leader, but they still fight valiantly in his name. There you have it, folks, the story of Sanguinius. If you enjoyed this, you should consider watching the Vulcan video, or however many other Primarch videos I've got set up by now. Otherwise, there will be a new vote on the next candidate for a video. If you want to be able to choose the finalists, hop on the Discord link in the channel information. That's all I got for you guys today, so as always, thank you for watching, stay safe, and have a good night.